So Rachel Reeves just sat in front of the Treasury Select Committee and basically admitted that her budget was leaked more times in a rusty bucket, blamed everyone except herself, launched an investigation that will probably find absolutely nobody responsible, and then tried to convince us all that everything's going swimmingly. Meanwhile, the markets are in chaos, the opposition is howling for blood, and even Labour MPs are rolling their eyes so hard they can probably see their own brains. Welcome to British politics in 2025, where the Chancellor announces massive tax hikes to fix a black hole that may not have actually existed, and then acts shocked when people start asking awkward questions. This is going to be good. Quick favor, if you're loving this absolute chaos, hit that subscribe button. Over 94% of viewers haven't yet. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Cheers if you did. Now back to the show. Right? Let's break down what happened here, because this is a masterclass in political disaster management, or rather, the complete absence of it. Rachel Reeves appeared before MPs today and admitted there were too many leaks about the budget, and they were very damaging. Too many leaks? That's like saying the Titanic had too much water or that Boris Johnson had too many parties. It's a spectacular understatement for what's been an absolute omnishambles of budget secrecy. The Chancellor insisted she was frustrated and is now doing something about it by launching an official probe into who was responsible. A leak inquiry. In Westminster, where leak inquiries go to die quietly without ever actually finding anyone guilty. Brilliant plan. But here's where it gets properly interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating if you're a taxpayer. Ms. Reeves herself has been accused of talking up a black hole in the public finances that effectively did not exist to justify announcing another massive round of tax hikes. The Office of Budget Responsibility told the Treasury as long ago as September that a downgrade to long-term productivity estimates had been offset by higher tax revenues and inflation. Translation, the scary deficit she kept banging on about was actually being fixed by money already coming in. By the end of October, Reeves had been told the books were in a small surplus. A surplus, as in more money coming in than going out. The finances were actually in decent shape. But did that stop Rachel Reeves from calling a press conference on November 4th to stress how bleak everything was? Did it stop her from hammering the country with another £30 billion of tax increases? Absolutely not. She went full speed ahead, announced massive tax rises, and justified it all by pointing at this terrifying black hole that was apparently shrinking on its own before she even lifted a finger. It's like calling the fire brigade for a house fire that's already been put out, then flooding the entire neighborhood with water just to be safe. Except in this case, the water is tax rises, and the neighborhood is every working person in Britain. Now, what did she do with all that lovely tax money she collected? Well, some of it went to caving into mutinous Labour MPs by scrapping the two-child benefit cap, which is fair enough if you support that policy. She also increased the headroom in the finances to help calm nervous markets. Headroom, for those not fluent in Treasury speak, basically means building in a cushion of extra money so that if things go wrong, you're not immediately in crisis mode. Which is sensible, except it does rather undermine the whole desperate emergency black hole crisis narrative when you've got enough money sloshing around to build in safety margins. But let's talk about these leaks, because they're absolutely spectacular in their awfulness. The Treasury Select Committee grilled Reeves about briefings that misrepresented economic forecasts the department was being given privately. Permanent Secretary James Bowler confirmed this morning that the leak inquiry will examine ministers, officials, and advisors. Everyone's a suspect. The Financial Conduct Authority has warned it could launch its own investigation if it's not satisfied with the findings. This has gone from embarrassing to potentially criminal territory because leaking market-sensitive information can move billions of pounds around financial markets and make some people very rich and others very poor very quickly. Ms. Reeves confirmed the leak inquiry will focus on briefings on November 13th that she branded partial and inaccurate. On that date, the Financial Times broke a story saying the government had abandoned a widely briefed plan to breach the Labour manifesto by increasing income tax. Now, this sparked absolute pandemonium on the gilts market. Interest on government debt rose sharply as traders priced in the risk that Reeves wasn't serious about balancing the books. Government borrowing costs going up is very bad news because it means every pound the government borrows costs more to service, which means less money for everything else. To contain the situation, government sources briefed journalists on November 14th that the income tax rise idea had been dropped because the OBR had recently upgraded tax revenue forecasts. Everything's fine. Don't panic. The numbers got better. Except here's the problem. That wasn't true. An exact timetable of forecasts released by the OBR later showed that was categorically not the case. The OBR was absolutely furious about being dragged into this mess and having words put in their mouth suggesting their forecast had improved late in the process when they absolutely had not. The OBR doesn't get angry often, but when it does, you know someone's messed up spectacularly. Reeves said this morning about the Financial Times story. It was not an off-the-record briefing. It was a leak. I'm absolutely categorical that was not an authorized briefing. It was incredibly damaging and frustrating. That is why we have a leak inquiry. It was not briefing that was signed off by me, any of my ministers or officials. It was unacceptable. So let me get this straight. Someone in government, with access to highly sensitive budget information, leaked it to the Financial Times without authorization. Then other people in government, also with access to sensitive information, briefed journalists with incorrect information about OBR forecasts to calm the markets. And nobody knows who any of these people are. It's like a spy thriller, except instead of saving the world, everyone's just trying to save their own political skin. Under pressure from Tory MP John Glenn, Reeves denied there were no meaningful updates from the OBR after October 31st. She went into a long explanation about pre-measures and post-measures forecasts, about how policy decisions affect tax and spend, about interactions between measures and economic variables. Basically, a whole lot of Treasury jargon to explain why there was still important information coming in during November, even though by the end of October they already knew the finances were in decent shape. It's a political equivalent of explaining why you still needed to eat an entire cake even though you'd already had dinner and weren't hungry. What's particularly delicious about this whole saga is that even Labour MPs have suggested the leak probe is a sham. They are observing, quite correctly, that such investigations almost never find a culprit. Westminster leak inquiries have a lower success rate than finding a decent cup of tea in an airport. They happen. People take them very seriously. There are stern faces in official reports. And then quietly, months later, it's announced that despite exhaustive investigations, no one person can be identified as responsible. Everyone moves on. Nothing changes. The Tories have called for the FCA to hold an investigation into whether market abuses took place, which will be rather more serious because the FCA actually has teeth and can impose real consequences. Now let's talk about this mysterious decision to abandon the income tax rise. Reeves said it was taken jointly with the Prime Minister. In the end, because of the decisions we made on high-value council tax on property and dividends and a number of other measures, we were able to keep the contribution from working people as low as we possibly could, she said. As low as we possibly could. That's doing some seriously heavy lifting as a phrase, considering working people are about to be clobbered with extended tax threshold freezes that will drag more of them into higher tax brackets as their wages rise with inflation. It's a stealth tax, and everyone knows it. She went on about how the Prime Minister and herself meet 2 or 3 times a week during the budget process, which is apparently not always the case between chancellors and prime ministers. There's a very close partnership. They decided it together as a team, which is lovely and heartwarming and all that, except it also means that if this budget turns out to be a disaster, which many people are suggesting it already is, then both Starmer and Reeves own it equally. No passing the buck. No claiming you were overruled. This is a joint production, a collaborative effort in potentially tanking the economy. The Chancellor said extending for a further 3 years the national insurance and income tax thresholds was not a breach of the manifesto, but it is asking everybody to contribute more. That's some Olympic-level linguistic gymnastics right there. It's not a breach of the manifesto, but yes, people will pay more tax, which is exactly what the manifesto promised wouldn't happen to working people. It's like saying I didn't break my promise to go on a diet. I'm just eating more food than before. The logic doesn't quite hold up under scrutiny. In other key moment from today's session, Reeves again denied that the threshold freeze was a manifesto breach, despite acknowledging working people will pay more. She claimed she had the balance about right at the budget last year, even though she was forced to mount another huge raid this time. If you had the balance right the first time, why do you need another $30 billion in taxes? It's like a builder saying they got your house extension exactly right, then coming back 6 months later saying actually, they need to rebuild the whole thing. The Chancellor insisted she remained completely focused on growth after the OBR refused to score any of her measures as a significant boost to the economy. That's got to sting. You announced this massive budget, loads of spending, infrastructure investment, all the things are supposed to turbocharge growth, and the OBR basically shrugs and says, yeah, maybe a tiny bit of growth, nothing to write home about. It's the economic policy equivalent of cooking an elaborate meal for hours and being told it tastes fine, I suppose. Asked whether she might have to increase taxes again. She said, I reserve the right to take action at any point. Translation: yes, more tax rises are absolutely possible, but I'm not going to say that explicitly because people will go bananas. She did rule out imposing capital gains tax on primary residences or watering down the state pension triple lock in this parliament, which is something, I suppose. At least your home and your grand pension are safe for now. The FCA Chief Executive Nikhil Rotti wrote to the Treasury Select Committee saying the organization's purpose is not to make judgments on political discourse, even though that discourse may on occasion have an impact on markets. However, he didn't rule out holding a probe, noting the government's ongoing leak inquiry.